Hi, this is Dr. Cora there. Sorry, there was a break there. I was talking there about harassment online. I suppose everybody that has YouTube would have a big team, to deal with harassment, but it's particularly distressing where it's a woman. It's a woman, and I realise now that I've been regarded as a state whistleblower for many years, and have only the penny just dropped in the last couple of months. Really, that this has been. I've been targeted as a state whistleblower, and I had no idea. It was just because of research I did on protective disclosures and parental alienation. And this has all been published. I'm probably what I won the Global Award for. So, ironically, I didn't realize it was so consequential or so damaging or potentially damaging or perhaps constitutionally challenging or whatever. I had no idea. I had no idea, none whatsoever. It was genuinely just done as investigative research, and it wasn't done in any way in terms of a whistleblowing, in terms of what a whistleblowing view to whistleblowing. No, it wasn't. But it clearly, it's only a fraction of the research I do. So anyway, this is now my latest research. So it's very, very serious, because if you're targeted as a state whistleblower, the state will do everything possible to penalise you, as they did with Maurice McCabe and other whistleblowers. And yet, I've got no help at all from any, including Transparency Ireland, have given me very, very little help and support. And I believe, that they're not being strong enough in terms of supporting whistleblowers because of conflict of interest. So this is alleged. So constitutional blind spots, constitutional accountability at a moment of. In fact, they've used my work and they've read a lot of my work, and they used my first paper, and I felt they didn't do enough to ensure that the amended act was the way it was. They didn't. I mean, they had my paper, and they didn't even bring me to. I would have done a better job than they did in terms of at the at the committee stages, and I wasn't even invited. I mean, I would have seen the huge change, which in the design, I would have seen it, and yet it seemed that they let it all through. So alleged. So certainly they didn't mention the omissions. There was no mention of the omissions. It was all his personal grievances, but the omissions were the big problem. Anyway, that's in the past. So constitutional blind spots, constitutional accountability at a moment of democratic strain. So this video explains a single idea that sits at the heart of my recent work. You can't describe what it's like to have been treated as a whistleblower for years, not realising that the badge was there and the smear campaign was working against you for years, and you had no idea. And then suddenly, bang, 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 bang. And when you look for information, it's wiped. Figure out where that comes from. So completely wiped. Constitutional blind spots, moments where issues of real constitutional importance are never properly examined, not because they are trivial or lawful, because timing, procedure, and institutional caution prevent them from being seen. My central claim is simple. In a period of a democratic strain, delay is not neutral. Delay becomes a constitutional decision. Democracy under strain. Across many democratic systems today, there is a growing agreement on one point. Democracy is not just experiencing temporary difficulty, it is under sustained structural strain. Now, if you go on X, every second post is about this. International research, and in fairness, I've never once been harassed on X. I'll say that for Elon Musk. I've never once been harassed. Well, I have, because I have him ringing me up every week. But on WhatsApp, not on X. He rings me up every week. I'm sure it's him, all right. And I know another lady that is rang up every week by now, so he must be ringing up. Elon Musk has spent a long time on the WhatsApp, and that should be stopped. That's not him at all. That's someone pretending to me clearly. So international research consistently shows declining democratic quality, weaker institutional accountability, increased concentration of power, and inevitably falling public trust. Crucially, this is happening inside long-established democracies, not only in overtly authoritarian states. Elections still happen, courts still sit, constitutions remain in force. But something is changing in how effectively these systems correct themselves. Public language as a warning signal. In many countries, including Ireland, all you have to do is go next, and you'll see this everywhere else on the all these channels that they have, the podcast. Citizens increasingly describe their experience of governments using strong language. If you look at all the comments on even my YouTube, they use corruption, capture, rigged systems, unaccountable power. This language is often criticised as exaggerated, but it's important to understand what it usually reflects. I mean, I listen, I hear it. Most of the time, people are not alleging criminal behaviour per se. They're describing lived experience. Perhaps they do believe that it's tantamount to criminal behaviour, but they're describing lived experience. For example, housing systems that never correct, policy outcomes that repeatedly favour vested interests, failures that are acknowledged but never fixed, institutions that appear immune to consequence, no accountability. The language is not a threat to democracy. It's a diagnostic signal that democratic correction is weakening. Why courts matter uniquely. In this environment, courts matter in a special way. Unlike media or civil society organisations, courts have constitutional authority, institutional independence, and the power to use binding decisions. Courts are uniquely placed to address structural constitutional problems, especially those affecting democratic access, participation, and legitimacy. Yet, it is precisely in democratic process cases about elections, nominations, or access to political participation that courts often exercise the greatest caution. From guardians to gatekeepers, traditionally courts are described as guardians of the Constitution. You'll see that now in the podcast. It's excellent if you want to have a look at it. Listen to it. I advise all my listeners to have a listen to the Maureen Kenny Politics and War podcast. That's excellent with myself. And it was done on a very limited budget, but it's excellent. It's got huge, the information is superb, first class, better than Primetime Investigates. But in democratic process, litigation, courts can sometimes become, unfortunately, gatekeepers instead. I mean, the court should open the gateway, but they actually close it. What does this actually look like? Structural constitutional challenges are reframed as personal grievances, abuse of process. I saw it. I witnessed a judge saying abuse of process, and I was just looking up the doctrines, and I said, bang, bang, bang. I'd be doing the doctrinal theory, and I walked in, and the judge says abuse of process. It was the second case, and I said, bang, bang. That's it. Inappropriate interference in politics, judicial, non-justicable. Matters better left untouched. Well, that's a good one. Matters left. That's a very good one. That's an excellent one. At least there's some truth in that. Cases are filtered out at the threshold stages rather than examined on their merits. And it's done brilliantly. It's brilliantly done. I mean, ingeniously done. Using restraint, delay, the doctrines of justicability, and then abuse of process, personal grievance. Actually, abuse of process isn't as bad as personal grievance in terms of risk management. There's case management and there's risk management. Oh, it's brilliant. The whole thing is brilliant. Individually, these doctrines are familiar and lawful. Individually, collectively, I mean, they can be truthful. But collectively, they can prevent constitutional questions from being addressed, depending on the sequence and the time between each of them applied, or whether one is introduced into the other. And it's brilliant the way it can be done to shut down a constitution. Oh, it's absolutely ingenious. And I was trying to figure out all this stuff, and then I had a number of 4 cases, and I did cluster analysis for my postdoctoral. I done cluster analysis. There was 4 clusters of cases, a cluster of 4 cases. I mean, cluster analysis was perfect to do a cluster analysis evaluation of 4 cases and to look at the patterns. Oh, couldn't have put it in front of me better. This leads to a central concept of my work: time delay restraint. That's a very good one as well. Time delay restraint occurs when courts avoid substantive constitutional engagement by allowing a time-bound democratic process to continue until it is reversed. For example, you're going to the court, we'll say, at a particular date, and then the hearing is at another date, maybe 3 weeks, and then the judgment is we'll say the day of the election or the day before the election, something like that. You see the way it works? The pattern is simple. A constitutional challenge is brought in time. Now, this is what's done internationally. So, we're not talking about what's done in Ireland. This is the international way but this is what's causing democratic decay or decline. And is it exponential decay? I mean, how do we model it? We won't go into the the actual, a constitutional challenge is brought in time. Courts, so the pattern is simple. A constitutional challenge is brought in time. Now, this is not just unique to Ireland. Courts respond with delay, that's the restraint, wait 2 weeks, caution or procedural narrowing, that's the reframing business. The election and nomination process completes. The challenge is then dismissed as moot, academic or destabilising. It's so destabilising that the questions can't be answered because it will destabilise the system. The system will collapse if the questions are, but of course that's not going to happen. The result is, even if the questions are answered, the system will not collapse. That's just fear, and you'd expect people in high places not to be worried about fear. The result is that the calendar decides, not constitutional education. Complete substitutes. This is completion substitutes for justification. Why delay is not neutral? Delay is often justified as prudence or respect for democracy, but in time-bound democratic context, delay is never neutral. Once an election or nomination process is completed, offices are filled, legitimacy attaches, remedies become practically impossible. A constitution issue that was never examined is now treated as settled, not because it was lawful, but because it was endured. This is how constitutional blind spots form. What constitutional blind spots are? A constitutional blind spot exists where an issue has real constitutional consequence, but institutional practice, but it's just practice or, historical practice, prevents it from being examined in time. Or the practice, for example, in terms of the techniques and the doctrines that are there, a number of them, but they're the key ones that are used. Blind spots are not gaps in the constitutional text. They are failures of constitutional visibility. They arise through weak counterpower, legal and resource asymmetry, institutional capture, judicial gatekeeping, and time delay restraint. No single institution needs to act in bad faith. The harm can arise simply from cumulative effect, not motive. Why this moment is different. In earlier periods, judicial restraint could be justified by the assumption that other institutions would correct problems over time. That assumption no longer holds reliably. And we can see this from the huge number of people who spoiled. They came out looking for somebody to do something about the state of Irish democracy. I that's the only answer I can give, because I've talked to so many normal, concerned citizens that are very concerned about the state of Ireland and want something done, and did that in order to make a statement: we want a change. This is not working. Today, we see weaker watchdogs, cautious media environments, resource-heavy institutions able to absorb delay, and citizens increasingly locked out of effective remedies for every problem they have, or particularly citizens are locked out of justice, locked out of health, locked out of education, locked out of housing, locked out of everything. They're all, anxiety is everywhere. It entrenches exclusion. So the vast majority of citizens feel excluded from our democracy. And they have come out in thousands and thousands to say this in the recent presidential election. Responsibility and effect. Constitutional accountability does not turn on intention. It turns on effect. If constitutional guarantees cannot be vindicated in time to matter, they lose practical force. Courts do not undermine democracy by scrutinising the rules of democratic participation. They undermine it when those rules operate without constitutional visibility. Early engagement preserves democratic choice. Delay forecloses it. What serious constitutional engagement requires? Serious constitutional engagement does not mean judicial activism. It means simply recognising that democratic processes, cases are structurally different. Timing determines whether constitutional review is possible, and threshold doctrines are tools, not exit routes. Where delay will foreclose review, restraint must be reconsidered. Closing. Constitutional blind spots do not announce themselves. They form quietly through silence, delay, and normalisation, but their effect is profound. They reshape democracy without consent, accountability, or justification. In a period of democratic strain, constitutional maintenance requires visibility, timing, and seriousness. Democracy is not protected by silence or restraint. It is protected by constitutional engagement when it matters most. Thank you very much for listening.